Thank you, Mr. President, for your statement. Before I ask questions, I'd like to recognize our Peruvian Ambassador, Harold Forsyth. Thank you for coming today. Also would like to do just a little shout out. Our summer intern's last day is today. Thomas Harrigan, thank you for all your hard work this last summer. Really appreciate you. Mr. President, I'm concerned that in many countries, respect for effective rule of law seems to be weakening. And in some cases, it is the government itself that's the prime instigator of that shift. Do you share this concern? And if so, what countries and what can be done?
One of the main violations of the rule of law, Mr. Chairman, is the gradual elimination of independent institutions. In Venezuela, and in some degree in Ecuador and Bolivia and Nicaragua, the executive branches have overtaken the justice administration. And they take advantage of this dominance of the justice administration to proceed against dissidents. It is a very grave violation of the rule of law.
Thank you. In the aftermath of the death of Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez, what are Venezuela's political prospects in terms of restoring checks and balances to this political system? And what has been the Maduro government's track record on respect for the rights of the minority or freedom of expression? What are the prospects of the December local elections, that they'll be conducted freely and fairly? And how do you characterize media freedom in Venezuela now that the last remaining television station critical of the government, Globovision, has been sold to a group of businessmen with links to the Venezuelan government?
Some journalists have fled to foreign countries. Other journalists are intimidated, and they cannot openly express their opinions. The government has bought media and has promoted the purchase of media by its own friends. At the same time, the government has taken advantage of its influence on the justice administration to go after independent journalists. Fraud. In past elections, there were rumors of fraud. But in the election this year that elected President Maduro, there was evidence of fraud. Evidence of fraud. The economic situation is very severe because of the shortage, and the macroeconomics have impaired. For instance, Venezuela was a country with a public indebtedness that represented no more than 24% of the GDP. Now it represents in between 70 and 80% of the GDP. Therefore, the situation is very complicated. The private sector is under permanent threat, the same the freedoms.
In your testimony, you mentioned that Chavez's economic policies continued by Nicolas Maduro have placed Venezuela at high economic risk and clearly undermined democratic governance. In your opinion, what countries in Latin America are implementing some of the sound policies, economic policies, that represent democratic governance and contribute to economic prosperity?
I will mention Mexico, Costa Rica, some other Central American countries, Panama, Colombia, Peru, Chile, Uruguay, and we are very hopeful with Paraguay and, of course, Brazil. And I am very hopeful for what is known as the Alliance for the Pacific, that included some of these countries. They are working with all the democratic values, but they face many challenges. One challenge is to make the reduction of poverty quicker. Other challenge is to provide the youth people with opportunities because of the high level of youth unemployment. And at the same time, to combine the knowledge-based economy with the commodities-based economy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield back the balance of my time, and I yield 5 minutes for questions for to the ranking member, Mr. Sears.